Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here at the Oxford Real Farming Conference. This is the dispossession of our land on the long legacy of theft, discrimination, and corporate control. My name is Freya Yost. I work with A Growing Culture, a movement support organization confronting unjust power in the food system. Today we will discuss the dispossession of land and its systemic and long-standing roots all over the world. There is no one definition that captures the full breadth of the issue. Dispossession happens both legally and illegally through large-scale land acquisition and smaller ones. It happens by individuals, governments, and public and private companies. Often it happens under the umbrella of what we perceive to be good things, such as agricultural and economic development, and even, sadly, conservation and organic farming. It happens at the expense of peasant farmers, food sovereignty, and human rights. As you will hear, we don't just lose the opportunity to be sustainable when land is taken. We lose connection to our ancestry, we lose livelihoods, we lose our sense of belonging, we lose our culture, our knowledge, and our home. And sometimes we lose our life fighting for our land. Today's speakers come from Tanzania, the Philippines, and the US, geographically disparate places with unique cultures, ecologies, and histories. Nonetheless, these efforts are deeply bound to each other in the global struggle for land. I'd like to now welcome our speakers. Samwel Nangiria is a socio-environmental scientist and long-term human rights defender who brings a balanced, comprehensive, and strategic approach to sustainable management within the setting of Indigenous and rural communities. He has over 10 years of experience working directly with the Maasai Indigenous community in Tanzania and Kenya. He is currently a leader of the Engu Serosambu Community Forest Trust, the only self-government model and highly decolonized conservation initiative in Tanzania. In 2017, he was voted the Human Rights Defender of the Year in Tanzania and given an award by the Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition. He also works closely with Insight Share, an Oxford-based participatory video organization to support communities to document their own stories. Kathryn Menga is a community development worker, a researcher, and a peasants' right advocate. She is the project coordinator for the Peasant Movement of the Philippines and has been on the front lines of organizing to gain land rights for the 9 out of 10 Filipino farmers that do not own the land they till. What's more, a farmer is killed every 4 days in the Philippines, making it one of the most dangerous places in the world to protest the theft of land. 9 Tumandak Indigenous people were just killed on December 31st for protesting the building of a dam that would impact their ancestral lands. Angie and June Provost, 4th-generation sugarcane farmers in New Iberia, Louisiana, have endured years of discrimination in the form of coercive contracts, fraud, below-market crop loans, vandalism, and retaliation for speaking out about the mistreatment of Black farmers until they were finally forced out of business in 2015. They went from farming nearly 5,000 acres and being recognized regionally for their high yields to losing everything they have because of targeted discrimination. In 2018, they founded Provost Farm as an agricultural operation and activism hub to preserve the ancestral legacies of South Louisiana's Black and brown farm and farm workers. So welcome, Samwel, Angie, June, and Kathryn. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. The way the session is going to work is we're going to go for about 45 minutes before we take questions. And so I'd like to ask our audience to hold your questions until the 45-minute mark, and then you can start to put them into the Crowdcast chat box. So I'm going to launch us into dialogue with a question. And the question I'd like to open with is, what does land mean to you and your community? And we can start with June and Angie, and then move on to Kathryn and Samwel. And please don't rush your time with these questions. These are important topics. So June and Angie, welcome. Thank you. And what does land mean to you and your community?
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for allowing us to be here and share this space with you all. Land is so important to us, right? And just as you were saying earlier, Freya, that land for us, the meaning of land means food sovereignty. It means upholding cultural and spiritual traditions. And it also means place and settlement, right? Because it's a way of earning income for yourself and grounding your personal livelihoods and your community. So it's community development, it's personal development. All of those things surround the issue of land and what land means to us. It also has an environmental impact meaning to it. Those who control the land control the laws that regulate the environment. So, in speaking of what land means to us, land dispossession or land theft means hunger, poverty, and global warming, right? And so, when you talk about the issues of what land means, we also like to address the issues of what land theft also means, to grab people's attentions and let them know what is actually plaguing our communities. And with the hunger, poverty, and global warming issues, there's also these subsets of consequences to land theft. That would be disenfranchisement, mass incarceration, housing issues, healthcare issues, fair pay. All of those things go into the meaning of what land theft means and what are the current issues that we face here.
And for me, it's really, really personal. I mean, land for me is everything. To be out there with my family, farming the grounds, I mean, that meant everything. It was a sense of hope. I always say when you plant something and watch it grow, it's not a better feeling in the world. So for me, land is everything. I mean, not only for me, for my family, but for our community. I mean, we were a community full of Black sugarcane farmers at one time, and it was special. I mean, to have all the community of sugarcane growers getting together after harvest season and just having celebrations and celebrating the hard work you've done. I mean, it was something special, and it's deeply missing our community. But land is everything, a sense of hope. Land is wealth. I mean, to be able to produce a crop and to provide for people is priceless.
Samwel?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you what land means to us, but also to be able to participate in this very important conference. I come from the Maasai community of Kenya and Tanzania in East Africa, and we are renowned as an indigenous group that has resisted systemically the changes that people are thinking about us and try to change our culture, try to change the way we live. And we've been labeled as an arrogant community that really don't want to change. And that is what actually makes Maasai a very, very famous community in the world. So what land means to us is very, very broad, because land is a home. This is our home, and this is a home we share with others, not only our home. We know that we share with wildlife, we share with water, we share with spirits, we share with ants, we share with everything. So this is a common home where when we defend the land grabbing, the land theft, we are actually defending not only for ourselves, but also for those other microorganisms, wildlife, who cannot defend for themselves. So for us, actually, land means a home, and a temporary home that you do not need to destroy, you do not need to timber, you need to take care, you need to develop relationship with it, because this is the only home we have sharing with other wild animals and everything that is found on Earth. Land also mean, for us, actually mean identity. We are identified as a group, and our land actually that we developed knowledge, we developed relationships over it. It actually means we identified with pieces of land we've taken care for quite a long time, and areas that we have also developed knowledge and
We've lost Samwel's visual.
Yeah,
Can we go back?
I've also lost the overall view. I can see the
Well,
the
please.
placard. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
we can hear
can
you,
you hear me?
but we lost the visual.
Can you hear me all?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I can keep
Samwel,
going.
please
Maybe I will.
Yeah.
Okay, so land actually for us is our identity. This is why we've been defending our identity. So land mean our identity. Land mean almost what we are as Maasai. We identified with the pieces of land we've been able to take care and develop relationship over centuries, and the knowledge that we have on how to conserve, how to take care, how to share with others is actually what identifies us as indigenous community. Land also mean knowledge, the source of knowledge. Our indigenous traditional knowledge is grounded on the land, and if you lose the land, automatically you lose the knowledge. For me, having been born and raised in the Maasai community, I have quite an intensive knowledge of the land I've been born on and I've been raised. I know all the trees, I know all the animals, I know how to take care, I know the names. So this knowledge is so intense and so important, and you can only practice it, you can only have it if you have the land and you have the control over that land, so that you can really use it and build the knowledge and train and take care of your kids when growing in that land with a lot of knowledge. Land also, actually, as my colleagues have said, is a source of our livelihood, a livelihood that is really connected with the land. We are pastoralists. We keep livestock for our life, and unless there is no way we can have an alternative livelihood unless we have land. If you take land from the Maasai, it's just like taking a fish out of the sea. They will lose connection, they will lose livelihood, they will lose culture, they will lose identity, because they cannot have any other way to develop, any other way to take care, any other way to keep their livestock, and then they have a land. And for us, it's actually more than just land. As I said, it's a home where we share with others. It is actually identifies our personhood. It's really like something that we cannot do without. And we have our own traditional systems of managing, taking care. So the land is actually everything for us, and this is why we are fighting to make sure that we keep it, and we keep it for us and for others who also we share the land with.
Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you. Thank you, A Growing Culture, for inviting my organization. I'm Kathryn Manga from Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas, or the Peasant Movement of the Philippines. I would agree with what Angie, June, and Samwel had said. Simply put, for us, for the Filipino farmers, land is life. This is what sustains our families and the whole community. For Filipino peasants and farmers who have been deprived of their right to till the land, land is justice. As said by one of our martyred indigenous leader in the Cordilleras, it is actually an arrogance to say that you own the land because you are owned by it. We cannot own something that outlives us. Only the people own the land because only the people live forever. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, we are of the land. We do not own the land. We are of the land. I like that. And it's clear listening to all of you that you don't just lose an ecosystem when you lose land. You lose a whole set of relationships that have been established over centuries by communities and families living in those places. So I'd like to get into some of the specifics about each one of your communities and your stories. So what are the precise ways land has been taken from you and or your community? And maybe we'll just start with June and Angie. We'll go through that circle the same way we did last time. So June and Angie, do you want to respond?
Yeah, so to go into specifically the precise ways that land has been taken from us, you have to look at the context of the history and the place where we are. We're in the American South, and June and I are descendants of slaves. And for 400 plus years, we have been subjected to laws that are there to oppress us, right? So land has been taken from us, and we have to use the words blatantly when we say land has been taken from us because of white supremacy and anti-Blackness that plagues the American culture and society. We've seen it recently play out with the insurrection and coup that was just attempted at the Capitol, and those things are residuals of all of those anti-Black rhetoric, anti-Black laws, all of that like language and culture that surrounds hate that has not been properly repaired, that has not properly been acknowledged or redressed. And so for us, we can go through like specific names of who are the enemies, right? Who's caused us all of these problems. But to really get at the crux of the issue for us living in the American South, we really have to say that the enemy is white supremacy. The enemy is anti-Blackness. And so if we can start properly addressing that, I think we could come up with real solutions.
And losing land is always compared to slow death. I mean, it really is. I mean, as farmers, when you're trying to get crop loans, you know, not sure if you're going to get a crop loan or how much the crop loan is going to be. I mean, those things take a toll on you mentally, physically. It's really a slow death. I mean, in this community, like our parents, which, you know, my dad is one of them, you know, a lot of our forefathers died at an early age because of the stress. I mean, to go there and you don't have to just worry about the weather if, you know, we're going to catch rain or a drought. You know, you have to worry about all these outside factors. If you know, people are going to come after your land, you know, how your crop loan is going to be funded, all those different things. It's really a slow death, and it happened to so many other people. And we see it happening to us at some times. You know, it's just like we say sometimes, you know, we'll be happy and lucky if we live to see 70 because the stress is so hard on you. I mean, it really is. And I've seen it with other farmers. And since we began to start talking about our story, so many other farmers have came to us and said, you know, we went through the same thing. We maybe didn't speak it. We didn't tell our story, but we're going through the same thing. And that's what it takes sometimes to get the community together and tell our stories, because all of our stories are similar.
Yes, thank you. As I said earlier, I come from Africa. And unfortunately, Africa has its own historical context when it comes to colonialism, because Africa was divided among European colonies, and the division actually had affected not only our lands, not only indigenous groups, but also even the local and other mainstream societies. But when it comes to the case of the Maasai indigenous community, we reside in both Kenya and Tanzania. We were one nation before divided into two different communities in two different countries. And precisely, we have lost more than 70% of the land we had before. And now, not only that we have lost, but we are keeping losing up to now, because of reasons and plans and that are actually emanating from colonialism and the way we are perceived as people who need to be supported, who are poor, who need to be changed, people who need services. in the expense of taking land. So we have lost land because of conservation, largely. Over 60% of all the national parks, protected areas in East Africa, actually once Maasai homelands. If you talk of Maasai Mara, Serengeti, Manyara, Ngorongoro, and many others in Kenya and Tanzania, they were our homeland. So we lost in the name of conservation, for national development, for national interest, and for the national, so that animals and wildlife can be taken care of properly by protecting the areas and cutting the ecosystem into pieces and trying to use the guns to protect the wild animals. So this is one major way that we have lost land. And this is unfortunate because the way it is promoted is different from what is happening in our lands. For instance, ecotourism, in our case, is a problem, a big problem. And not only for the individual investors, but also even for the big credible companies like Thompson Safaris from America, for instance, is one of the companies that has taken land from our community recently. From 2006, we've been in a struggle to secure a piece of land that Thompson Safari, such a credible big tourism company, is taking for business and using money, using police from the government and all the influence they have to take our land. So different from the way, contrary to the way it is promoted, tourism and ecotourism actually is not coming to support communities, but actually to take land in our case. So conservation, protection, the whole idea of Western conservation idea of partitioning the ecosystem for business and for leisure is actually has affected us so much because our areas are so rich. We have wildlife, as I said, we are sharing land with everything that is found in our own land, and we don't have to timber. And this is why we've been victims of conservation ideology from the West. We have also lost land because of mega development projects. This is very common. We have government taking land for mining, for instance. We have in my village, the village I come from, we have a mining company, and Chinese are mining now. They've been given a license and they've taken big chunk of land for exploration and mining. So mining is another bigger projects, actually taking land in the name of national interest, national development. And because you're told you're also a citizen of Tanzania, this land has to be taken because it is potential, it's viable for business, and it has to be taken and used to generate money to bring development to you people and other Tanzanians. Also in Tanzania, the local government is established in such a way that all the lands are put in the hands of a small political. When a village is established, the management of land, the control is transferred from the real people of the community and handed over to a small group of 25 people who are democratically elected so that they can be managing the land on behalf of the entire society. So this one has brought a lot of confusion because Maasai community, for instance, we have our own traditional system of managing land, managing affairs of the community, but now this political system is interfering so much. We have an opportunity now to use the village authority to take land, to change the laws. For instance, in other villages, you find this land is now falling under township, for instance, authority. So it's no longer, it's under a new law completely, and automatically you lose land, you lose control, you lose any connection to that land because it is under a different authority. So this is also another way that governments are using in taking land. It's a very soft way, which is coming with policies and legal frameworks, but it has impacted seriously on our lives. But also, land is taken just because they feel our lands are empty, not utilized. This land is completely need to be utilized because it is very profitable. We have also seen some big plantations in our lands in Kenya and Tanzania. In the southern part of Tanzania, we see coffee plantations started in a highland where the Maasai live. Just because this land is profitable, research has been done and proved it to be very, very profitable. So an investor has to be given to bring money so that you can be developed, because you are very backward, you're poor, and you need to be supported. So this is precisely how land in Tanzania and Kenya has been really taken, and we lost during colonial time, and we are keeping losing because of a lot of change in policy and legal frameworks and global business atmosphere, where any investor can come in now, and land is digitized, so people can see the kind of land they need for investment. And even the small business that we have, we live very adjacent to the Serengeti National Park, and the government, the area we live has been given the list for sport hunting. A royal family from Dubai has been given around 4,000 kilometers square of a land we're living in. So the wildlife are coming from the national park, following the people. So when the wildlife come out of the national park, the government also develop interest to follow the wildlife. So they keep following, and I think we don't have anywhere to go. We have to struggle with what we have now. So this is precisely the scenario and the context in East Africa, particularly with the Maasai community and the other indigenous groups, that the governments and corporations teaming up and taking lands for various reasons, but actually for money.
As for the Philippines, I can share with you 3 examples of how land grabbing looks like in our context. Maybe these stories will give you a clearer picture of what is land theft and land grabbing is in the Philippines. The Philippines was colonized by the Spaniards for 300 years, and they have installed the hacienda system in many parts of the country. Hacienda system is where the Spanish and other elites in the region enjoy exclusive rights over vast areas of fertile lands. The hacienda system continues to exist in the Philippines until now, but without the Spanish hacenderos. They are now the rich compradors who are also our powerful politicians. When farm worker gets to be beneficiaries of a parcel of land, usually after years of appeals to the government or through organizing and pushing for reforms, these reforms come with a price, and usually they pay with their lives. We take the case of the struggle of the peasants of Hacienda Luisita in 2004, which embodies how generations of landlord bureaucrats used law and terror to further exploit and oppress the farm workers and to keep the almost 6,500 hectares of the hacienda all to themselves. The farm workers' strike was a culmination of a series of actions to address the joblessness and the other ploys of the Coangco Aquinos. These are former presidents of the country who used to keep the hacienda workers' wages at a very low price, 9.50 per day, or 19 cents in US dollars. The picket ended in the death of 14 people. After the massacre, the government listens, and then they eventually give the farm workers a chance to be beneficiaries of land reform, but real estate agents from the landlord management either harass or sweet talk the farmers and force them to entering Ariendos. Ariendos are the illicit leaseback deals. Why does it become an option for the farmers? Because yes, they have a certificate of land ownership, but this means they have to pay for the amortization of the land. And to develop that land, they must have capital. But we forget easily that they're coming from a 9.50 wage, and that they do not have any means to even start planting anything in what used to be sugarcane fields. So they fall for the arrangement with the arrendadors, who are agents of the landlords. with no other option, they go back to planting sugarcane. But under the Ariendo arrangements, farmer beneficiaries lose control of their land, and essentially they become farm hands, measly receiving measly wages, and then when they cannot deliver, land becomes a collateral for their debts. When this happens, land goes back to the control of the landlords and the corporations. This is what happened to 76% of the beneficiaries of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program of the government. They were not able to pay amortization, resulting to forfeiture of their land. Another example I can give you is the struggle of the farmers in Bulacan. Our local organization, the Alliance of Farmers in Bulacan, have been defending their rich forest and agricultural lands from big real estate developers like the Araneta, the Villars, also big politicians in the Philippines for more than 36 years. These big families have been converting vast agricultural and forest areas through public-private partnerships and other extra legal schemes. They have been converting these lands, productive lands, into shopping malls or exclusive homes. The local chapter, who have been farming in Norsagaray, Bulacan, one of the municipalities in Bulacan, since the 1950s, are defending their 75.5 hectares of farmlands against the Royal Moluccan Realty Holdings, who is claiming to be the owner of the land. With an ongoing case in the local agrarian office, the Royal Moluccan still sent goons to the farms last October 2019 and demolished houses, looted and took money from the farmers and took their animals as well. The farmlands were eventually fenced. At first, they were able to go back to their farms to harvest what was left, but they were constantly harassed by the goons, and they were fired upon even while harvesting or transporting their vegetables. Right now, 60 farmer families are landless with no means of livelihood amid the pandemic. They are still waiting for the decision of the Department of Agriculture regarding their case. What is interesting about this case is that evidences point to the senator, Cynthia Villar, the chairperson of the Committee of Agriculture of the Philippine Senate, as the one behind the Royal Moluccan Group. The Villar Group has been interested to develop the area in Bulacan. The Villar family owns the Philippines' biggest home builder and shopping center developer. Amid the pandemic, she was quoted saying that there's nothing wrong with converting farmlands to homes. The last story I can share with you is the recent death of 9 Tumandok tribesmen. Tumandok is an organization of indigenous farmers in Iloilo who are resisting the construction of the Halaur River Multipurpose Project. The Tumandoks for the longest time have been trying to be forced to accept 50,000 pesos per hectare, a little more than $1,000, I think, for those who are holding ancestral domain title. Their persistent resistance has delayed the construction of the second phase for almost a decade, the second phase of the dam for almost a decade. Last December, the synchronized police and military operations killed 9 members of the Tumandok tribe in Capiz. Among those killed were the current Tumandok chairperson, Roy Giganto. According to witnesses, soldiers and policemen forcibly entered the house of the victims at daybreak at around 4 a.m. The authorities ordered them to get out of their houses, and they were fired upon. Some of the family members even said that some of their loved ones, the victims, were tortured before they were killed. Aside from those 9 Tumandok tribesmen killed, 18 others were arrested, including former Tumandok chairperson Marivic Aguirre. Without the local organization, the community may easily give in to the threats and the construction of the dam. This will become a problem for a lot of people in Iloilo. Thank you.
Thank you. Your stories are incredibly powerful and really sort of bring to life this idea of plantation economics. That sort of moves us quite nicely into the next question, which is around the enemy, which, listening to you guys, the enemy seems really sort of systemic and complex and also pervasive. And I'm feeling very suspicious all of a sudden of anyone who claims to have a clear-cut solution to, I don't know, global impact or change, because this is an incredibly complex sort of poly-crisis that we're in, is what I'm sensing. And so I'd love to hear from each of you, is there an enemy? How do we fight effectively? And very importantly, how do we heal? Not only ourselves, but also our communities, because that's another element that I'm tracking in each one of your conversations. This is not an individualistic problem. This is a collective problem. We sort of, especially in the West, we need to move away from this idea of my land, my health, my rights, my gut, my garden, to our oppression is interconnected and woven across geographies, no matter the differences between history and culture. So on that note, June and Angie, I'd love to hear you sort of speak to this question about how do we fight effectively and how do we heal?
Sure. So yeah, like going back to what we were saying earlier in regards to facing our enemy, first we've got to really understand who they are and what type of tactics are used. And everything that you were saying, Kathryn, about how Filipino farmers are facing crisis out there sort of relates to some of those same tactics that you can see that are residuals from colonialism, right? And it's
Yes.
just like a real systemic issue of a privileged class that are in power who work towards oppression and upholding those tactics of racism, neglect, and fraud, and abuse and retaliation, all of those things. Then we also had to look at, like, okay, so how is this being maintained, right? Of course, these folks are in power, but they also need people who codify it. Black and brown people who also often codified and turn their backs against their brothers and sisters, right? Through colorism, misogyny, homophobia, all of those things. So in order for us to fight our system, fight against those systemic issues, we had to recognize, name them, label them, and give specific targets to them. In order for us to fight back, we also had to educate ourselves just on the basic laws that govern our country. Which laws are there to be enforced and which laws are there that need to be created? What we found in our sort of self-education was that in America, our civil rights laws are treated with too much civility, right? They're not treated as crimes against humanity. And I always say that just because it's not a specific hate crime that causes instant death, that doesn't mean that our communities aren't slowly dying and suffering. And that's what you see happening. And we are hoping that by shedding some light on that circumstance about how we fight back, like can we get civil rights laws that actually are addressed as human rights laws, right? How do we address those issues? And when we do that, I think we can properly redress all those residuals from days of enslavement, Jim Crow, to now, right? Because we have never properly addressed those issues in America. And I think we heal by providing reparations, right? By actually providing ways to close the wealth gap, ways to get land back to people. All of those things are necessities in moving forward for us.
And here, as Black farmers, we're less than 2% of the farmers here. I mean, there are 3.4 million farmers, and we're less than 45,000 farmers. And out of that 45,000, 17,000 are facing foreclosure. So For us, I think the best thing to do is try to keep that 1.3, 1.4% that is forming, try to keep them still actively forming. That's the first thing. We can't afford to lose those farmers. And second, we need to get the next generation wanting to farm. I mean, it's easy for me to say, okay, I would love for the young kids to go out and farm, and they say, well, look what y'all went through. And that's a fair question, but we have to keep fighting. We have to get, especially if the families own property, you want that young generation to take over the property. So we just have to get the next generation actively wanting to farm, and we have to educate people on what's happening now. I mean, now they're starting to hopefully pass a bill with the Black Farmers Justice Act. And one of the things in that bill is to give land back to Black farmers. So it's a big task if it's going to pass, but we're hoping, if we just keep shedding light on the story, that some things will happen in the future. Because in next 5 or 10 years, I mean, there won't be any Black farmers left if we stay at this rate. So we have to keep fighting, and just try to get the next generation actively involved.
Yeah, because if we don't fight back, if we don't combat this problem and address it properly, that means that our communities, no matter where we are in the United States, whether we're in the north, south, east, or west, Black communities will be plagued with with issues of housing, with issues of food security, like we were talking about at the beginning. So, in order for us to really understand like the plight of the problem, we have to really talk about real solutions as to how and why Black farmers are so important. And that's like the first step in fighting back, is to discuss why are we so important and why are we needed in society.
Thank you. My colleagues are actually preempting, because we share a lot of commonalities when it comes to issues and enemies. It all comes with the whole idea of when you try to do a mapping of who is an enemy, who is the closest enemy, who is middle, who is behind, it's very difficult, as you said, because the colonialism is actually at work, especially when you talk of Africa. There's this perception built over centuries that the local communities are poor and they need to be changed, they need to be supported. Their cultures are actually the reason why they're poor. They're holding land that are not developed, and investment is a solution. If you do business, get money, then poverty will not be there, and so forth. So this perception has been actually deep-rooted, and it's been developed, and this is actually what is informing our policies, our legal frameworks, our national development planning, and everything. The whole operation of the country actually is depending on this, built from this perception. So when it comes to who is an enemy, is that this is actually colonialism is coming in different ways, and they are now influencing the countries to ensure that they are secured, their business of today, of tomorrow, of their children, going to be secured in these regions. So this is we must fight. If, for instance, for the case of the Maasai, we feel like we are one of the most affected communities around the world, because we lost big chunks of land for business. So enemy is actually colonialism that is coming back in different ways and changing styles, changing approaches with a lot of promising future and so forth. So for us, if we are to fight, how do we fight? One is we've been fighting saying our government is taking land, but when we try to see who is behind the government, who is giving money, whose tactics are coming through the government, is actually somebody with money from fighting this the Dubai royal family. these guys have money and they can do anything. They can give any money for them to come and hunt animals for pleasure or for leisure. So now, how do we fight? One is for our people to understand that probably trying to fight the governments, actually we are fighting the wrong enemy. We are not getting to the person who is behind the whole mission. Secondly, is for us to try and do and document how much have we lost, what happened, what are the impact, because we can only convince even the coming generation if we can be able to document globalization has had on our land, on our life. And if we do that, then in our case, for instance, we try to do a traditional land use mapping. Try to map where were we in before 1950, for instance, what happened over the last 50 years, and then where are we now, and what is the projection of the future? If you show people the map, is very astonishing, very alarming. It's still to lose, and people might not be able to see because our people don't read. They don't understand exactly what is happening behind the curtain. So I think we must change. We must change the game. We must also try to see. Will really protest help us? We have protested for centuries. What happened? Can we try other ways? Can we say, can we try courts, for instance? In our case, we have resorted to Tanzanian courts, East African courts recently, because we see even if we are to lose the land, but at least we can have a lot of documented memory about how the land has been taken for the future generation. We just need to fight, but we also need to say what fight, what tactic will help us, given technology now, documentation, for instance, as I said, and I think this is going to help us because I know protest is very, very, and almost governments are very much used to. If you protest, you'll be killed, you'll be arrested, an issue will be like handled politically or even cooled for a while, and then the government and corporations plan from behind the curtain. But now, how do we heal? I have a story quickly. One is we started working with a project of trying to document the approach is trying to empower, because one of the reasons why we've lost land is intermediation. People talking advantage of the language. Plan for us about trying to give people an opportunity to speak for themselves. Try to document what people remember, what is good for them, and try to share video with anyone you think can have an impact. And also to build internal solidarity. We work with InsightShare, a UK-based organization, Oxford-based organization, and they've helped us. And with the PV, we have actually covered, and a lot of impact has happened within a very short time. Not only to show the world what is happening, but also to build the internal solidarity and to let the coming generation understand exactly what is happening and why do we need to speak for ourselves. Why do we need to challenge the fake news about indigenous communities, for instance, about local communities? Why do we need to challenge the mainstream media that has been corrupted, used to talk about something that is not really what is happening on our land? So regionally, we talking about establishing a Pan-African Living Cultures program. Instead of talking about land right, trying talk about the living culture. What really identifies us? Land is part of the living culture, and try to broaden the idea and giving it a bigger scope to make sure that, because a colonialist is actually very much embedded with our identity, with our livelihood, and everything that we do. So we are trying to build a movement of Africa, indigenous communities, to try to bring the sense and to communicate issues around living culture and how we are affected when you touch land, you touch cultures, you disturb the equilibrium that is keeping us together as a community. And lastly, with this program of Pan-African Living Cultures, we are now launching a fellowship, an indigenous fellowship program within SciShare. This program is going to help youth to document and to engage deeply in the community, for us to be able to communicate issues around culture, security, traditional systems of managing land, and what has worked, and try to say, instead of fighting, we try to engage, because having been fighting for quite a long time, we haven't been able to conquer, or rather to be able to get what we wanted. So we are trying to say, changing the game is about engaging, trying to talk about how do we manage land, for instance, instead of, you are taking my land. So it's a fellowship that is different from the university scholarship or fellowship. Is actually a fellowship that youth are trained on the ground to support documentation for internal strengthening of solidarity, but also to engaging governments and other like-minded stakeholders across, because this is the only way we can really challenge intermediation, fake news, corrupted media, and so forth. And so this is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. As for the question, if there is an enemy, how do we fight and how do we heal? For our context, in our context as Filipinos, yes, there is an enemy, and yes, they have bases for us. They are the landlords, who are also our big politicians and owners of big companies. There's also the unequal international bilateral and multilateral agreements, which has not benefited our farmers and our call for rural development, but has instead taken away from us our right to control our resources. They are also our enemies. For the Filipino peasants, another face of the enemy is the military. Why? Because as the landlord fends our farms, the military, the state forces, they are there to deliver the first strike. Be that to harass our farmers, or to kill our leaders, or to drop bombs in our communities. Right now, we are counting already 311 farmers, members of the Peasant Movement of the Philippines, killed by the state forces because they have been tagged as terrorists. How do we fight? We fight by building our movement. We fight by organizing ourselves, by organizing the peasants and the farmers. All this aggression to our people are not only robbing us of our land or of our right from us, it's also robbing us of our culture of knowing what is right. When you are too afraid for the survival of your family, you will only know that the earth is only used to flee. But as a great man once said, you fight and then you run away, but you live to fight another day. When you have an organization, it becomes a collective strength for us. And that is the only way that we can start fighting, actually. And that is the only time that we can sit down, raise awareness of each and every one, talk about strategy, talk about campaigns, talk about how important it is to hold pickets in front of government offices while there is an ongoing dialogue, because that has been one of our best practices. Nothing happens when you go on a dialogue inside a government agency without a picket outside. Without organizing our ranks, we are powerless. How do we heal? We heal by celebrating our small achievements. When we are able to push for reforms in our localities through a series of dialogues or a campaign, We heal when the butchers who have killed many of our brothers and sisters are put in prison, and when justice had been served. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. And I have one last question, and we'll try to make this brief. We have just 5 more minutes, and our hosts have kindly given us a Zoom webinar room that we can switch over if the audience has questions. So on the hour, that will be pasted into the crowdcast, and we can switch over for questions from the audience. But the last question that I want to sort of get in before we leave, and maybe just be brief with this one, is around sustainability and regenerative agriculture. Many of you have addressed colonialism, and there is strong scholarship and lived experience that shows the links between colonialism and climate change. And a lot of times the sustainability movement and the regenerative agriculture movement, or the larger sort of effort towards regeneration, neglect to center justice in their argument. It becomes overly about sustainability. Samwel has addressed the Western model of conservation as one of the key enemies of the Maasai community, and that is profoundly I think meaningful for us to try to understand that. So I'd like to hear from each of you briefly around what do you have to say to the sustainability movement? What are they missing here? So yeah, let's start with June and Angie, and we'll be brief, and then we'll move over to the Zoom.
Well, I think the idea of the sustainability movement in regeneration needs to rename its ideas, right? Because it's not truly sustainable and it's not truly regenerative, because it's very exclusive. It doesn't include the conversations of Black and Brown farmers and the issues that we face today, especially in the United States. And I think that we have to ask ourselves the question, is it truly sustainable? Is it truly regenerative if it doesn't surround us in the conversation? Sustainability for us means sustaining the existing Black farmers that are currently farming here in the US. And regeneration means for us is getting that next generation going and thriving again. So just a quick answer, it's not truly sustainable. It's not truly regenerative. It's truly not a movement until we are included in the conversation.
Yeah, I just like to say we need inclusion. I mean, pretty much, yes.
Yeah, sustainability movement, I've been asking myself, what we need to sustain if the whole world is actually shocking and shaking, and so unless we are in the center, there will be no true sustainability. Sustainability is actually about listening the dark part of history and try to say, how do we address? So yeah, for me, we need to be in the center of discussion. Thank you.
I would have to agree with Samwel. If we are talking about sustainability, then it has to be people-centered and pro-people.
Great. Thank you, everyone who has joined our session and can't stay for the after Zoom session. And yeah, so just thank you to our panelists for being here, and we'll see you in the Zoom room in just another second. So please close this out and make sure you get the link, and we'll move over there now.
Thanks.